Today we are looking at the care market. The transformation of adult social care towards a more personalised system will require a market where it is possible for people in need of care and support to be able to access care that is readily available, of good quality, and has spare capacity.
The issues here: can the provider market respond to the challenge of personalisation? Well, if it doesn't, it's going to suffer significantly. There are obvious points about distortions in the labour market, with large numbers of personal assistants are providers who are, by the way, essentially quite small scale. And our analysis of the provider market is around 80% of it is on a very small scale, and about 20% of it is what we might regard as larger scale in one form or another. So actually what we're talking about isn't necessarily one response for one section of the market. We're talking about a multiplicity of different approaches which address the needs of different kinds of organisations. Some of them are private, some of them are voluntary, some of them are community-based. And then you can't necessarily say one size will fit all here.
As I've said, I think the independent sector will continue to be the dominant provider of services for the foreseeable future. We're not going to see a rolling back of the independent sector, the private sector, and its replacement with the public sector, basically for cost reasons. And the strong impression that I get from talking to providers is that they are currently adopting very much a wait-and-see attitude. And I think it'll be very difficult for councils to persuade them to invest money on developing new services in advance of the actual demand flowing through. So I think that transformation will probably only emerge once purchasing power is actually in the hands of the users, and when providers can actually see the preferences they're expressing or are allowed to. When will residential care cease to absorb the bulk of social care resources? Because right at the first slide I said that in the case of elderly care homes, over 60% of resources are being absorbed by residential care services.
What we aimed to do, the aim of the study, was to look at the perceived threats and barriers and opportunities on the part of domiciliary agencies, home care agencies. There are the opportunities for responding to increases in user choice through direct payments, individual budgets, and other personalisation mechanisms. So we were concerned with the home care agencies themselves. We were concerned with their experiences to date and their perceptions and expectations of what would happen in the future. In all of the local authorities, the 4 local authorities, the local authorities saw their role as only commissioning for local authority funded clients. They looked at the time we did this study a year ago, did these interviews, they did not see themselves as being responsible for commissioning home care services for self-funders or for direct payment users. Agencies had currently and have for some time enjoyed the protection of long-term contracts. They will be very exposed when those contracts begin to be pulled back as more people move over to individual budgets. There are restrictions currently imposed by zone contracts which reduce choice for direct payment personal budget holders. Agencies have had little exposure to an individualised purchaser market. And they are currently preoccupied by trying to retain their workforce by promoting to both workers and users the benefits of having agency workers. I think for local authorities, there are some really important issues about how to manage this new market situation. Neither the agencies nor the local authorities that we spoke to had any real sense of what the potential demand was. There was no, I said at the beginning that local authorities didn't see their role as being as including commissioning or purchasing or market management for private providers. They had no idea of what the demand was outside of the services that they currently commissioned. So I think that there needs to be a broadening of local authority roles in relation to looking at supply, looking at demand much more broadly outside of the local authority contracting situation. And that will mean looking at the kinds of choices that people make with their direct payments, with their individual budgets, and making sure that, and communicating those choices back to the providers so that providers can respond in due course. And I think a third area which this research has highlighted is that for some agencies, and particularly the smaller agencies, they will be very exposed as local authority contracts are pulled back. So difficult relationships, difficult clients, difficulties in terms of payment. At the moment, the local authorities play a very important role in mediating those difficulties. And again, I think agencies will be very exposed if local authorities pull back from that role, and agencies have to engage directly with their purchasers.
We talk a lot about commissioning, but we hardly ever talk about decommissioning and recommissioning. We just assume that we build on what we've already got. And you heard from a number of others this morning about what that might mean. And I'm sure in Hampshire you can grasp some of that. 54% of older people account for the total PSS spend. Actually, my figures are slightly different from William, so I'll have to have a discussion with him afterwards about what that means. 48% of the total spend is on residential care. Personal feeling, that's too high. I think that's going to change. The range at the moment, though, is fascinating. It's between 30% and 70%. So that's a huge range, isn't it? Who's got it right? Do the people who spend 30% on residential care, authorities that do that, or do the ones that on 70%? 70% must be too high, mustn't it?
Our 2008 overview also found that people funding their own care often do so without proper information and advice. And at this point, it might be prudent to mention eligibility criteria and the impact that that has on the quality and availability of care. Making personalised care poses real challenges, and I don't underestimate either the economic nor the social challenge. And early indications from the In Control pilots show that 100% of younger people with a learning disability chose in the early stages to take their money out of residential care services and place it in supported living. That again is going to pose many, many challenges for us in shaping the market.
I think in terms of who we are, we're a peer support organisation run and controlled by disabled people. We support and involve disabled people irrespective of their impairments, and we have a progressive social policy approach to life. We believe that progressive social policy is the way forward, and that's why we came into existence along with every other Centre for Independent Living and every other user-led organisation, which is the current jargon. We do welcome this opportunity to put the views of disabled people into this agenda, and hopefully that will be useful to us.
I would say the last time that I actually felt vulnerable actually when I went into hospital, because I didn't have any choice and control. People were looking after me in inverted commas in a way that I couldn't control, where they didn't necessarily know what my requirements were, and actually that made me feel a lot more vulnerable, being looked after by supposedly highly qualified staff than actually when I'm at home in my own environment employing my own personal assistant who doesn't necessarily have any MVQ or relevant training, but actually knowing how I like things done and communicate with me, and that we have a good dialogue. Okay, I just think it ironic that just when the agenda seems to be moving in our direction around personalisation, around choice and control, our organisation are under threat, and there does seem to be larger charities that are not user-led kind of jumping on the bandwagon.